backward than everyone else. But, for example, do you think Japan actually produced according to its natural comparative advantage? That's why they're where they are today? Answer is no. Do you think Germany produced according to its natural comparative advantage? No. Okay, no one does, so why do we teach that? Because it suits our interests, of course. And virtually everything we teach to developing country students under the guise of development economics is not to benefit them, it's to benefit us. Liberalize your financial system. You think that really benefits developing countries? No. There's no evidence of it. And never has been any evidence. Of course, I can always pay academics to come up with some econometric stuff which proves it. And this is the point of it, is because we know lots of these scientific conclusions are dubious, we build models. This is the second group that I despise a lot, is the model builders. Because what they do is they bamboozle people like the mathematics with the model. You see, I got a model. See my model, it's got 400 equations. Whoa, 400 equations? How many variables? You know, and you know, it goes on like this, of course. How accurate have these models been? How many of them picked up the last big crisis, the biggest crisis of our generation? If anything the economic model builders should have picked up, it's like, you know, a comet the size of Earth hitting the Earth and the observatory saying, we didn't see that one. Where did that one come from? Okay, that's the same. I don't know, but my model was working. I don't know where, you know, our models are working. So what's the purpose of these models? Again, it's to create an illusion. The illusion of scientific rigor. I give my lecture every year to my students. How many of them say, I'm not going to do an econometrics thing, I'll just do some, informed data, simple graphs, simple tables? None of them. They all want to do econometrics. Correctly, I also did the same. That's how I won the university prize, an econometric model, so, you know, I'm not knocking it, because it's the game we play, you see. You don't do that, you don't get a good mark. You don't get a good mark, you jeopardize your future. I mean, this is the game, you see. When you are a teacher at the university, you don't publish by writing models. You don't do econometric work, you don't get published. Not serious journals, anyway. This is the system we have created. Very difficult to break out of it. And the way we persuade people to accept our ideas is we bamboozle them with a model. Wow, it must be so sophisticated. I was at this time, money supply causes inflation. You see, I keep going back to this because this is like a nightmare to me. I lived through it. You know, every single academic had to do an econometric model showing excess money supply causes inflation. I knew it was garbage. And for one simple reason, that most of us do not use money to pay for goods, do we? What do you use when you go to shops in advanced countries normally? Apart from debit cards, credit cards. Most goods are bought on credit, you know, not with cash. Cash is actually one of the least used things. And the relationship between credit and cash in the system is almost non-existent. If I want to actually look at the purchasing power in the system, I should look at credit. But who controls credit? Banks. But who controls the money supply? Government, you see. Remember, my aim is to attack government, not to attack the banks. That is why the theories do not permit you to talk about excess credit expansion. You understand? So over and over and over we had this mantra repeated. Excess money supply inflation. Model after model after model. And I kept repeating one simple thing, and people kept telling me, look, Howard, you cannot just repeat that one simple thing and say that that is an article. You have to do your own model and show that what they're saying is wrong. You see? This is the point. You have to play their game, which generally a lot of us are not prepared to do. I think we are finished with this section. Okay, what I propose now is breathing deeply, and then we come back, and before we start any more, I'm going to let you have opportunity to have some comments and ask some questions and so on, okay? Otherwise it's too much of a monologue, and I'm fed up listening to myself, so I'm sure you are as well. Okay, so we have a short break now, and you get some coffee and tea and whatever. Those who are fed up and want to go home, please do, because I'm sure there's some good drinking time left at home. Okay, but otherwise we meet back in...
Yeah, let's say 10 minutes, so 8:45. See you back at 8:45. Please be in time, as we have to leave the building in time as well. And I'm sure you need time to discuss these ideas and challenge them with Mr. Nicholas. So see you in 10 minutes.
Anything? Comments? Not just questions, just comments.
A comment and a question. You've mentioned actually a couple of times in your while you were speaking the fact that it's governments who are printing money, although in the vast majority of countries on the planet that's not actually the case, as the central banking systems are effectively privatized. What additional effect does this have on what we perceive as neoliberal economics? And then my question is, what actually distinguishes, because I've seen some of your lectures on YouTube, what distinguishes Marxist economic theory from neoclassical economic theory?
Oh, the second one is a really big one, and I'm going to answer it only obliquely, but just on the first one, the thing is that technically, I'll just let them sit if you don't mind. It's okay, it's okay. Well, the question that was asked is whether central banks alone have the right to print money, and the person who asked the question implied that others have the right to print money. My understanding is it's not quite correct that others have the right to print money. It goes like this, that for each country, the monetary authority, i.e. the central bank, alone has the right to print money, except in the European setting where it's the ECB that has that right. But banks can create money effectively by creating deposits and then going to the central bank and drawing on cash reserves from the central bank, which the central bank will never deny them. Okay, so the central bank effectively accommodates the demand for cash. But formally, it's the central bank alone that has the right to print money, cash. Okay, so that's why the emphasis of neoclassical economics has historically been on printing of money. That is the source of the evil. If we can stop that evil, then everything is okay. See, the brainwashing has gone on for so long that now you read in the press all the time, there must be inflation. Now, why this has been important, and this is where the Marxist thing comes in, is the only way I can vindicate Marxist analysis is actually by calling investment analyses. So one of the big battles we had starting 2008 was, will printing of money lead to inflation? It's worth a lot of money, this answer. If it does, you buy gold. If it does not, you sell gold. Okay? If it does not, you buy bonds. Now this is worth a fortune. If you get it right, it's worth a lot of money. Now, many, many, many people bought gold. Gold went right through to $1,900 an ounce. Do you remember that time? Do you know where it is today? It broke through $1,500 at 3 o'clock this afternoon. Okay? Falling. You see, they're printing and printing, gold is falling. In other words, nobody expects inflation, they expect deflation. You see? So it's a major, major battle, and the only way I can prove to people is basically saying, well, from a Marxist perspective, the logic of the analysis leads us to this belief, because printing of money has never fundamentally been the source of inflation. Okay? Inflation is always due to one factor, costs. Okay? There cannot be a sustained increase in inflation in the global economy unless costs rise. What's the biggest cost of all? Wages. Do we see wages rising with this level of unemployment and chaos? I don't think so. And if wages don't rise, it's very difficult to conceive of anything else rising. Okay, so this is where the big battles take place and where it has a lot of meaning. The only thing I'm going to remark on the second part is about Marxism as opposed to neoclassical. When I was younger and I was into Marxism, I was into it with my heart, you know. And I think that's true of everyone, isn't it? I mean, it is very normal. And that sort of Marxist analysis was, in my view, not very scientific. Okay, I like the big words, dialectical this, and historical materialism that, and value this, and abstract labor that, and so on, blah, 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 you know. And actually, I couldn't understand what I was saying, but I got a PhD for it anyway, you know, so that was very nice about it. But the real thing is this a science that really helps me to understand? Understand in a way that it makes no difference what your political or other convictions are. You will listen to me because actually what I'm saying has a lot of sense to it. And the only proof I can have is this. Many, many business groups in a number of countries know I'm a Marxist. And for most people, Marxists are people with horns on their heads, you know. Now this is the thing that I have to switch off, that they invite me for business seminars, okay, and I always ask first class ticket, okay, and I always ask to stay at the Hilton, and invariably it's just for 24 hours. Why do they waste so much money to get me when they know I'm a Marxist? Okay, it's very simple. I want to know what I'm going to forecast for the most important assets that they are all interested in. Why do I do it? Because economics is power. And my aim is to empower developing countries. Okay? It's to try and help them to ride the system and to survive the storms the best they can. I'm not sure they ever listen to me, or at least not in ways that I would like them to listen to me, but here's the thing, I don't ask them to be revolutionary. I don't care whether they're revolutionary or non-revolutionary. My aim is to ask people, is this logical? Does this appeal to you? Okay? Am I saying something which is factually correct? Has the future turned out the way in which I had forecast? Okay, so my last boast is last year, so it's on video, you can see that. I go to Sri Lanka, everyone wants to know the collapse of the euro. Is it 1 month, is it 2 months? And I'm telling them there's no collapse of the euro. Europe is fine, Angela Merkel is playing games. She's deliberately orchestrating crisis after crisis to accelerate integration in Europe. This is my view. Okay? And I'm 100% sure that's what they're doing, because they fear the merger of East Asia, and they fear an Asian bloc, which will actually put a lot of what Europe is trying to do in jeopardy. Okay, that's been my view from the very beginning. Okay, and that's why they don't pick on the big things, but they pick on Greece, Cyprus, you know, maybe Portugal, but not really. But Italy, you know, not at all, you know. And the aim is acceleration of integration. Now, for example, fiscal policies are all essentially being centralized. Before, the plan was 2030, you understand? But now it's brought forward, and without any parliamentary approval, you notice, because we learned from the war with Iraq, weapons of mass destruction. You remember? I frightened the population enough, they agreed to everything and anything. And that's what they have done in Europe. How do I know that? Because I have never seen the German stock index, the DAX, fall like it did in 2010. This was not private investors selling and doing this. This had to be government inspired, because we've never ever seen falls of that magnitude. The falls were there to concentrate people's mind. Okay, so with my perspective, I go there, I tell people, now they're asking, when are you coming back again? You know, and that's, for me, the point. You know, the Marxist analysis helps us to understand the global system better than neoclassical. It's not an ideological thing. I'm not asking for revolution. I'm not asking for a socialist society. This is not what it's about. I believe Marxism is a scientific analysis. And it is the unique analysis. I'm also not a pluralist in that way. I don't believe, well, you have a good view, and I have a good view, and someone has a good view. I don't believe that. I actually believe my view is the correct one, you know, in the sense that it is based on a lot of evidence and a lot of research done by many people before me, and I'm now putting it all together, and I believe that's the correct path. To actually know what all of this is, we need a long lecture series, and you don't want to listen to me about that. There are plenty of other academics who are very good at expounding Marxism. Sorry for being so long about that.
Yeah. Earlier you told us that you were a man of science, and you just described that Marxism can help us explain what's happening economically. But what possible observation of economics would refute Marxism? Because that has been a critique by Popper, for instance, that there can only be verifications found.
Yes, I think so, and that's what I said, that, you know, some people, the way they refute Marx today, someone sent me an article where they were saying that, well, Marx predicted, you know, the ultimate collapse of capitalism. And that's not true, okay? He predicted lots of things, also remember, when he was young, you know, before he studied economics. But the essence of business cycle analysis is the system goes down and regenerates when it's down. Cycles are very important for the regeneration of capitalism. What happens in a crisis is the weak are basically expunged. Ground is fertile for the strong to go stronger. Okay? You need crises in capitalism. That's why we've had 47 cycles where we have a down and then we go up. When you try and keep that system from going down, you weaken it. Okay, so that's the first thing. So it's not true that Marx predicted capitalism would collapse and so on and so forth. That doesn't stop lots of Marxists from saying that. So many revolutionary groups are still waiting for the end, you know. So like some Pentecostalists or whatever are saying it's this year, then the Marxists are saying it's that year, and each one has their rationale for it. But I don't believe that. And I don't believe lots of things that people say Marx actually predicted. He did say many of these things when he was young, but not after he really wrote his scientific work, which is Das Kapital. And I think when that can be attacked, and it has been attacked, I'm not denying it has been attacked, then I'm open to someone telling me that, that really doesn't stand up to empirical verification, that doesn't stand up to logic. So logic is also really important, and Marx has been attacked on logic. But so far I'm yet to be convinced by that. I must say, when I first did my PhD and did all this jargon, I got sick of it. And I decided I'm not going to be a Marxist anymore. I'm going to be a Sraffian. You know how fond I am of Sraffa. That's where I became really fond, because I love the maths. You see. But honestly, then what I decided is I'm sick of all these Marxists talking. I need to deconstruct what they're saying. I started to read Das Kapital. Oh, I knew I shouldn't have done that, because that's when I got sucked in. And from that moment I couldn't let go, because the more I read of Das Kapital, the more I said, well, that makes sense to me. Now it finally makes sense. And the reason it makes sense is because he was really writing as a scientist and not a revolutionary. I mean, that's where I part company with a lot of my academic friends and revolutionary comrades, if you like. Because for me, it's not about revolution or socialism. The minute you actually put an ideological perspective in, you destroy your scientific integrity. This is my view. Did I answer all your questions?
Yes.
Sorry. You had questions.
Yeah. I'm familiar with the concept of bitcoins.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I was wondering, what are your thoughts on it? And maybe you could quickly explain what it is.
Well, actually, I usually say I don't know anything about this. I'm sorry. The only thing is, the last couple of days I read a couple of articles. So, because I'm just fascinated by pyramid schemes. And I think this is another one of these pyramid schemes, which will get quite big and then evaporate, because essentially, in the end, someone has to guarantee real resources behind something like this. I mean, there have been many such schemes in the past. There have been many such coins. And if you look at the UK, there are small regions in the UK that issue their own currency and guarantee it with certain shops. Okay, and there are quite a large number of them, in fact. And you see this even in the United States, that it also. So in a way, Bitcoin has also been there. The only difference is this is in the internet, if you like. It's an electronic money. So in my view, it'll sort of exist there and flare up for a little bit and die a death. That's my view, and I'm sure I'm going to be wrong, and it's going to be fantastic. And I know I should have bought those bitcoins at 20 cents a dollar, in the dollar, and so on. But that's all I know at this moment. I don't know enough to really say. So if someone says I'm talking rubbish, I will say yes, I am talking rubbish. Sorry, I remember you had a question. I'll ask.
Okay. I'm not an economist. I used to study ecology. So I don't understand about money. I still don't understand trees and land and rivers and fish and things I can touch. And if I have an apple tree, I know I will have apples for the rest of my life. I don't know about my pension. I'm lately pretty into about the theory of the commons and the history, and more in fact maybe about the future. I mean, how are we going to change things? You didn't mention Ostrom in the Nobel Prize. You mentioned 5 that are not neoclassical. And what do you think about Ostrom? Is she classical?
She's a neoclassical. I mean, basically, this whole group were given the Nobel Prize as part of let's say, the fringes of new institutional economics. The idea is basically, again, instead of the state legislating, now you have local communities taking responsibility and power. And the importance of this is that it makes those communities much more vulnerable. You know? And this is my view. In any case, their origin is pure neoclassical. I mean, that's where they come from. And then they divert into new institutional, and then they're somewhere on the fringes of new institutional. The problem is the rhetoric that they use seems very radical. Okay, and it confuses a large number of people. Like you, I have an environmentalist friend in Suriname who has a sloth sanctuary. And she sent me excitedly, she said, here, look, at long last the Nobel Committee has given something to somebody who is totally outside the neoclassical world. And so I was totally aghast, and I thought all my theories are totally wrong, until I read because they gave it to these three people. One was really an orthodox, I think it's Williamson, who was the orthodox new institutionalist, and she was also, because they needed a woman, because a woman hadn't been given something for a long time, so she was the total woman as well, but also she was talking about local communities, you know, and using the term commons and so on. But let there be no mistake, this group basically wants the privatization of the commons. You know, this is fundamentally what it's all about. But the way it's done, you actually suffer from the illusion that they're actually not after that. But in fact,
very, very much under the impression she's against privatization of the commons.
I think you have to send me an email, and I will send you the links to the relevant articles. Sorry, I'm going to gradually move to this side.
Given that most countries no longer use the gold standard, what do you think what do you think of fractional reserve banking, and where do you think the value of money ultimately has to come from in the real economy?
Tell me what you mean by fractional reserve banking. Sorry.
Just the whole issue of giving more deposits than they do actually have in savings.
Right, right. I mean, this is inherent in banking systems. Okay, this is actually fundamental to banking, because it's actually credit that creates deposits. Okay, they first decide on loans, and then they acquire the deposits later. You know, we are taught differently. We are taught that first you get the liabilities, so the deposits, and then you make the loans. In fact, no bank actually behaves that way. Banks are money-making institutions that start with their products. Their products is credit, okay, and then they acquire either the cash or the deposits. Now, nowadays we have what is called shadow banking. Okay? And shadow banking is a phenomena based on low interest rate and printing money. They don't need deposits any longer. What they're doing is they're going into the money market, where there's all this cash floating around at near zero interest. Okay? So therefore they don't have to have the whole problem of depositors and monitoring deposits and so on and so forth. They just go get the money and lend it out. Okay? Now this is where we are at this moment in time. It's very dangerous. It's an incredibly dangerous structure, the whole structure that has now been built up, because in case most people don't realize it, the shadow banking system is bigger than the formal banking system because of all this printing money. What happens when the interest rates rise? What's going to happen on that day? Okay? This is where the next great collapse is likely to come. Because the day interest rates start to rise, everyone is going to rush for the exit. And I mean everyone. Because more and more and more banks are actually relying on, not on deposits, but actually on short-term money market funds. Okay, so now, in relation to gold, The thing is that there's historically been this idea that if we revert to a gold standard, we would have more stability. I don't think so. I basically think gold standard carries with it fundamental instability, not actually stability. In any case, it's unlikely to get really any serious attention. I mean, it's sort of like the fringes of the Republican Party still talk about gold standard and so on, but I don't think that mainstream economists and mainstream policymakers are really thinking on those lines seriously.
What about the plan for the gold dinar?
I've seen that as well, but actually so far you
What
can't...
was the question?
What about the plan for the gold
The
dinar?
gold dinar. I mean, there are all these discussions and so on, and invariably there are discussions which take place because everyone is frightened about the loss of value of money, which they're right to be frightened about with all this printing, but I don't think gold ever will replace fiduciary issue, state paper money. I think what will happen is it can be held as a reserve against any future inflationary trend, but I don't think it can be used ever again as currency because there's simply not enough of it. I mean, it's just too difficult, and there'll be clippings and all the things that happened to gold before during the previous gold standard periods. Sorry, he was there first, and I see here. And
yeah, in your talk you showed very well the contradictions between the theory of capitalists and practice, and also what's behind some of these ideas and these theories. But you didn't have time in your talk to elaborate on some of the important ideas in it. So let me maybe ask you a question so you can elaborate on one, because I think it wasn't clear for those who are just schooled in mainstream economics. Right. Which is, you mentioned it in one or two sentences, that what the capitalist derives his or her profit from is that it lets the worker, labor, work, and it pays the laborer less than what the laborer creates. But I think this is something, I don't know if you could elaborate on that, because it's something for many people very difficult to accept. They think, well, he's getting a decent wage, right? And the manager, he brings with him cleverness and innovation, and therefore he also deserves to get money. But in your theory, I guess, in Marx's theory, a laborer creates the value. So
not strictly. I mean, the first part of the interpretation is correct from the Marxist point of view, but managers can also be exploited. I mean, managers can also be adding value. Okay, so in Marx's thinking, the one that does not add value specifically is the owner, the capitalist, the one who has the shares. Okay, so that's, and here is where you have real serious problems for neoclassicals, is this. Think of this. In neoclassical economics, there's only profit or interest. One. There's no separation between interest and profit, is there? Now in your textbooks they call profit interest, you notice. But some neoclassicals say, now wait a minute, there is a difference between interest and profit, isn't there? Now interest is the return to these machines, the physical. So the machines, like people, are productive. So you are productive, you produce extra, the machines produce extra. Okay? And then that is the profit. I'm not contesting that for the... that's the interest, sorry. I'm not contesting that for the moment. Then some neoclassicals say, but actually there's also something called profit, which is over and above the interest. Now, this is not in all textbooks, it's only in some where they're honest. It's also in Milton Friedman's books, because he was one of the better thinkers in neoclassical economics. And they answer it by saying, if interest is the return to capital, meaning the machines, what is profit the return to? entrepreneur, they say. The entrepreneur. Now remember, we're scientists, so the way we say profit is the return to capital. We say the marginal productivity of capital is linked to the profit, okay? What is the marginal productivity of entrepreneurship? Anyone? What is the marginal productivity of entrepreneurship? There isn't one, isn't it? What is entrepreneurship? You see, that's where we get into problems. You understand? Okay? People understand there's a distinction between interest and profit. Well, the real distinction is this. Profit is what accrues to the productive capitalist, the owner of the money advance in the production process. Okay? That generates a profit. Out of that profit, they pay interest to bankers who have lent them some of the money that they use to start the production. You see, there's a difference between
once it reaches the point in the bottom of the...
Yeah.
But if the line can sit, like left or right...
Basically, anyway, it was great to talk with you, and I really enjoyed this evening. Probably more so than you did, but I wish you all well, and hopefully we have another chance to get together.